thinking got me thinking, how can I come up and get myself a Lincoln?
Hey, it's Jason, ODB, aka the Lincoln Addict, getting ready to work on my 64 Lincoln, aka Smugglers Blues. This is the first time I'm doing anything that you're going to see here on this video. Done a lot of research, have witnessed many videos, and been reading the LincolnForum.net, talking to John Cashman, Blair and Teresa here locally in the Tampa Bay area, and essentially you'll see from the unboxing video, I'll put the link down in the description. Essentially, I ordered all these parts through John Cashman, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade everything in the trunk. So all the parts that essentially make the convertible work, that's all going to be upgraded. The pump was pretty weak in the car, so we had a swap to a temporary pump to test everything out. That was many months ago, back in 2018. And then the lines blew out once the pump was working good. Typically, and I've seen this, a couple folks comment, if the line blows out in the car, mine blew out where the fluid was leaking into the car behind where the back seat is, and the fluid will kind of leak down, and it ends up puddling underneath the seat, and it might even drip down a little bit, but I think it's mostly confined to under the rear passenger seat. But you got to do this upgrade. I mean, think about it. This car is 1964, so give or take, it's 55 years old. I mean, things deteriorate over time, especially when they sit. And this car was purchased at the Auburn auction in 1976 by a gentleman that I bought it from. And for give or take 40 years, I mean, the car was only driven, what he explained, like once a year ish in the summer. So the car's been sitting a long time. You could go through John. He's got on his website one price. You end up purchasing the whole kit. It comes fairly quickly, and literally it's something that if you want to try your hand at doing it, again, that's why John sells the parts, or it gives you an idea that if you have John Cashman come to your place, obviously you're going to have the cost of the parts. He kind of mentions that on one of the previous Lincoln Addict podcast episodes. He talks a little bit about the cost associated with him coming out, which is like a service fee. Obviously, you've got the parts, which is a big chunk, and then you have his labor and expertise. And you're probably going to see, I'm going to make mistakes with doing this, right? I mean, he's got 40 years experience, and John can probably do it with a blindfold on. So with myself, I'll do a little bit of the hyperlapse video. I'll kind of speed some different pieces up. I'm going to actually tackle this probably over a couple of days, because try to chunk out a few hours a weekend to work on the car and kind of go from there. So with that being said, 1964, if you are on Instagram, follow at Lincoln Addict. You can also tap on the hashtag Project Smugglers Blues. That's Smugglers with an S, the nod and paying homage to the late Glenn Frey, which my dad and I loved that song from the Miami Vice era. So 64, basically another quick update, gonna end up, the motor's still out, getting rebuilt, right? So as quick as you sometimes want that to go, like I did, by the time you acquire all the parts and you have the machine shop do what they have to do, you deal with some broken parts in the mail. If you've listened to Lincoln Addict podcast, you'll know that I had some cam woes, so kind of work through that. Once the motor's cleaned up and everything's ready for assembly, then you got to kind of go through that, that step. So that phase, I should say. But basically, motor's going to get done soon. The transmission's been done. Looks beautiful. They cleaned up the casing really nice. I'm going to work on the convertible itself. Now, it was working for the most part. John, of course, you go through John to get the upper or the flapper motor and then the limit switch up there, which the limit switch essentially dictates, it has to be working. It's part of the brains of the system is what I call it. John may call it something a little bit different, but it's a very important piece. And that flapper motor, when the deck lid comes up, you have to have what they call the flapper here. That has to come up to, as John says, to the erect position. And that switch, once it's adjusted properly, it'll ensure that, boom, the flapper opens. And then when, of course, you're putting the top down, you want the flapper's going to come up, the top's going to go in, and then the deck lid's going to come down, and then it'll be the reverse. But Basically, you work through John as well on his website, or you can call him. He'll take care of the flapper motor going through it, and like there's a gear in there. There's some things that he basically has all that in stock. He'll send you out a unit, usually right off the shelf, through priority mail, and then you'll get that. So that's a key piece. But again, the top was working for the most part, and then the lines blew out. So once this upgrade is done, what I'll end up doing is ordering. I'm in talks right now with Jim Wallace. I could put the link down there to his Lincoln interior and convertible kits. He's here in the state of Florida as well. We're very blessed. We've got a lot of knowledge about these cars in Florida. But I've been to Jim's house before. He's really kind of a legend. Many of you guys know him and know his name. But it's going to get a blue top to match. In 1964, if you had blue paint and blue interior, from what I've read and researched, you can order the blue top. So I'm going to get another blue top made, and you have to have a professional install it. You know, typically, I would say 90+% of the time, you're not going to tackle an install like that at home unless you've got some interior knowledge and previous past working experience. There are folks around that can install these tops. I am working a deal right now with a guy that's installed many of these, so hopefully that works out. And then, as John and I talked about on Lincoln Addict podcast when John Cashman was on, you also, when you're doing all that work, you're going to want to get the new wiring that goes through this top. I think it's around a $200 to $220 price point for that, which is small in the grand scheme of things. You imagine these tops over the years going up and down, and there's wires, and those wires will eventually, crease and potentially just become brittle, so to speak. So you want to do that. There's some other miscellaneous parts. I think they kind of refer to them as the hockey sticks. Forget the exact term, but there's a few other little things that brings you to around $1,000 price point for the top, for the material, for the miscellaneous pieces. Then you have to have it installed, which again, that's in addition to. But just wanted to kind of recap. The motor's going to be done soon. Transmission's done. Working on the top now to get it fully functioning. That way, when I take it to the interior gentleman, he can install the top. And once that's done, it's going to go over to Edgewater, Florida, is the hope. I've got a good friend over there, Jimmy Graham, at Jimmy's Rod and Customs. Jimmy worked on my 67 Lincoln. He's worked on other Lincolns as well. This car, don't cringe, for some of the purists, it is going to get a Devious Customs. So go to deviousluscustoms.com. It's going to get a full Devious Customs suspension kit. So control arms in the front. It's going to get a full bolt/weld-on kit in the rear, and the car will ride just as good as it did from the factory. So airbags all the way around. I've got one tank. I might add another tank, so I'm kind of debating on that, and kind of debating on what the setup's going to look like there. So with that being said, pretty much motor, top, suspension, transmission, all that's going to be gone through here in the next few months. Hopefully that'll be finished. And then really what's left is some additional wiring things I want to do. So if you guys know these cars, 64, 65, you have to upgrade the amp gauge and the dash. So you either need to have it rebuilt, or you need to go with, dare I say, some folks don't like the Dakota Digital, but they do have a bolt-in kit. I know Jeff was instrumental in working with Dakota Digital to have that kit built out, from my understanding, for the car. So if you're not a purist or you're looking just to upgrade, you can go get that kit. Forget if it's $1,000 to $1,200, something around there, but you get that kit. Or you need to have the amp gauge upgraded, or you can go as far as following Pat Tian's article in the lincolnforum.net. He kind of talks about upgrading it from an amp gauge to a volt gauge or a voltmeter. So I think I'm saying that right. I'm trying to go from memory. Got a lot on my mind. Amp gauge down, you can upgrade it to a volt gauge, or you can go through Blair Farmer here. I tag him a lot. If you guys need his information, I can provide you with his email address. He's pretty busy, so he asks that you email, not call him. And that helps kind of weed out anyone that's not serious about getting work done. But you can also send, you could take out your amp gauge, you could send it to Blair. And Blair, I can tell you right now, is probably going to be the most economical price point to have that rebuilt. He's done many of those over the years. It's a big safety thing, but I have one from another parts dash I had purchased that I already had rebuilt. So that's going to go in this car for the time being. I'm going to upgrade the alternator and things like that as well, probably when the motor gets installed. So with that being said, appreciate you guys watching and subscribing. Hopefully you listen to Lincoln Addict podcast. You can go on podbean.com/Lincoln Addict, I believe it is. And I'll put the link in the description. You can also download on iPhone. You can download the Podbean app. That's P-O-D Bean, B-E-A-N all together. You could download that application, or on iPhone, go to the purple pre-installed podcasts app. If you've never listened to podcasts, you probably have it stored away in a folder, or you've never even opened that application. But open that app and search Lincoln Addict and then tap on subscribe. You will be notified when new episodes are posted. You can go back, typically, we only have a good 8 to 10 episodes. You can go back and listen to those from the beginning. So take care, everyone, and a lot more to come on Project Smugglers Blues. We out of here. Take care. Okay, I'm going to try a couple different camera angles in this video, but so, you're watching maybe some of the little, the hyperlapse video, and you're kind of probably thinking, man, I want to see what's going on, right? So, again, I mentioned I've never changed all this stuff before, but when you look at the parts, the way I laid them out, you essentially, for the lines, you got to take all the lines out. So, the pump is there. And what I'm basically doing is I always keep those old like 99 cents paint deals where you put paint in for when you're painting your home, and I'm just trying to kind of capture any fluid for the most part. You see not a lot of it really flowed out. Since the lines blew out, a lot of the fluid was under the rear seat, as I mentioned in the video at the beginning, under the rear seat. But basically what I'm doing is I'm unhooking the lines, and it's pretty simple. You just follow the lines over here, down here, across. And someone had mentioned to me they want me to point out, so I'll try to do a better job in these videos. The way I always do things is try to keep things simple. So on a job like this, what my thing is, I want to be very careful, take out these bolts. They're going to come around. What I did is I took out these guys here to move this wiring a little bit out of the way. There's one here. There's one here. You can kind of see how, I guess, just grease and fluid and, these cars, over the years that they leaked a little bit. I mean, you can see everything. Nathan Wilson does a great job cleaning all this. Whenever I'm going to try to do the same with some electrical cleaner. But, you've got one here. So, right here, right? And it's going to come over to this guy. Take this off. But basically, that's where a lot of the lines are, right? I mean, they come from the pump over to here, over to here. I always forget the exact term of these deck lid cylinders, but that's what I'm working on right now. Gonna take all this stuff off, and then the lines. What I did, let me stand up. You guys remember right there? I mean, everything's already pre-cut. So really, you just lay it out, and you kind of go through it, and you take your time. I do have, you probably saw the hose a second ago. I got the vacuum cleaner here because I'm pretty OCD when it comes to things. Like if I'm gonna take like this off, for instance, right? And you can kind of see down there. I mean, this is a solid car too, but I mean, you can just see how the glue and grease and all that stuff. I'm gonna do my best, and I haven't vacuumed down here, by the way, yet. I did vacuum over here, kind of, but I'm gonna do my best to kind of clean things up as I go with the job. Now, it doesn't mean I have to do it as I'm going, but before I maybe put these bolts back on today, I'm gonna, do some cleaning, if you will. Now, it's not gonna look perfect, but again, I'm a big advocate for just kind of, if you've got things apart or you can clean things up a little bit. Like over here, I haven't vacuumed yet, right? So obviously I'm going to spend some time and do all that. And then I do want to point out, there's a bar that 6667, John will tell you, right? Because Lincoln fixed the defect. There's a big metal bar that goes from here all the way over to here, okay? If you go into lincolnforum.net, John has a write-up in there. It's super simple. You go to Home Depot, and I'll have to grab what I bought. There's a square little, you can kind of see it, it's leaning right there on the floor. You buy that square tubing, you measure it, and when you've got this stuff apart, you've got a little bit of play in here. And I forget if you got to take out this guy here, but John talks about it, and he'll tell you on the phone too if you ever talk to him. You got play in this with this removed. Sorry. You got play in it with that removed. What you end up doing is you put that square tubing right here on this guy over to this guy. You do have to cut it. I think what he suggested, and I copied and pasted, one tip I'd give everyone is use your notes app on your phone, or use Google Apps, or use, if you got an iPhone, I just use Notes, or I use Evernote, and I save a lot of stuff, verbatim, and I have different sections, and right here I've got it saved, and I'll have to do maybe a little video on that. Now there's a guy that sells a kit, and he sells it for almost $100. It includes instructions. It's not hard to do, but basically what it does is it puts, and you'll see a lot of the cars, I mean, pretty much all the cars I would say that John has worked on, or you'll go to even like an LCOC event, you'll see the cars that have it up to 65, and then you'll see the cars that don't. But there's a bar that'll run across here, and it stiffens this up. And as John will tell you, that's one of the defects on these cars. So, again, if that makes sense, cool. If not, I'll do a little video, because at some point over the next few days, once I finish all this up, I'm going to take that square piece of tube, shoot it with some black paint, let it bake in the sun to dry, and then I'm going to install it in there. So, all right, guys. We'll keep on keeping on.
Got me thinking, how can I come up and get myself